Hey everyone, today we have Dr. Dean Boyd, Dr. Brent Frederick, and Mark Hulsebus. And goal is to ask these guys what's going on in the pork industry. So with that, thanks everyone for joining today. I would just ask for each one of you to introduce yourself briefly for those that don't know you, which are not that many. And if you can start, Dr. Boyd.
Sure. I have been the technical director for the Hunter Company for 18 years, and at present time, Dr. 𝗴cie𝗶𝗴𝘀 was in charge, and I plan to retire and consult full-time end of December.
Very good. Almost there. Super cool. How about you, Dr. Frederick?
Yes, my name is Brent Frederick. Grew up in South Georgia, a trained nutritionist. Joined Christensen Farms about 17 years ago and spent a lot of great time there. Have recently moved to 𝗴𝗵𝘁'𝗀𝘀𝘁𝗿 and now serve as the pork innovation lead for North America.
Very nice. Very good career right there as well. And finally, you, Mark.
Sure. Thanks, 𝗪𝗫𝘀, for having all of us on the call today. Looking forward to it. Commercial director for Cargill Animal Nutrition's North American pork business. Have spent about 23 years with the organization, and also had the good fortune to spend 5 years with Trio Foods as a live production manager with that business in the midst of my professional career, and have been back at Cargill for a couple of years.
Super cool. I lost count here, but there's probably over 60 years of swine experience on the call, so I appreciate all of you. Dean, we start with you, and Brent and Mark can jump in anytime. So what is the state of the industry today?
𝗪𝗫𝘀, the state of the industry is pain. And we're used to pain, but this one will again be quite severe. Things are getting back somewhat to normal in terms of the COVID-19 disruption of marketing. But as we come out of that, we come into significant economic loss. And our part of it is that the fall has had back reach into the summer, having significantly more pigs than we really have shackle space. And estimates will vary, but perhaps through Q4, there may be $40 to $50 loss per pig, with a glimmer of hope perhaps not seen until toward the second quarter of 2021. And so we're back to a point where cash is king, and unfortunately, we're going to lose some people and have already done so. There'll be some further consolidation, I expect, or we expect. And I think producers that don't have a plant ownership or alignment are going to be particularly under extreme stress unless they have been involved in a niche marketing.
Interesting. Any comments there, Brent, Mark?
I think the piece that I would probably add, but certainly supporting Dean's comments, 𝗪𝗫𝘀, is you look at the 12-month forward profit curve, and no news to anybody that's listening to us today. We're looking at $35, $36, $40 head losses for the next 6 months. If you look at that forward curve, you get out 6 to 12 months, and that looks, although not good, certainly much closer to break even at about $2, $3, $4 head loss on average if you go out to 12 months. And probably the most important fact that, if you want to dig deeper around it, is the first green ink or black ink, depending on how you want to describe that, doesn't really materialize until May of 2021. And so the question becomes, how do you begin to and not begin, how do you continue to survive the devastation that's going on right now across our industry. And I think we'll probably get into that a little bit later in the call, but really this is a time of revolution and not evolution, right? And so as we go through our discussion today, I think that's going to be one of my take-home messages is we have to try to do a lot of different things right now as an industry to maintain the participants that we want to maintain in the industry for everyone's good. Now is the time to be bold.
Interesting. Brent?
Yeah, I would echo those comments as we kind of think forward and what do we need to be thinking about right now and what actions are taken. Definitely, as Dean mentioned, conserve cash and capital and working on being efficient and lean. You know, I think there's been a great deal of work to work on flows and number of pigs and try to match up the shackles that are there so that we can get as much pork to the market, wherever that market may be out there. So I think definitely some good work has been done there to match those up as best can be, but maybe a little bit more in that regard going forward. The thing that I'd say too is we've definitely been through some storms in the past, and every time we go through a crisis or activity such as this, and I think Dean will kind of comment, and Mark maybe too, on relative to the past, but it seems like we always come out of these things better and stronger, and so some of the lessons that we learn, don't let a crisis go to waste, and to Mark's point about thinking through how we weather this storm most appropriately and prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. So,
yes. So if you look at the last several decades here, Dean, is this crisis compared to anything you've seen in the past, or how is it different?
Now I have had a lot of past. I marketed my first pig in 1957.
Wow.
So I've had to go back across the decades, but what I can say is I think there's some similarities to 1998. But before I get there, the plant shackle space problem at the present time is not new to us. Typically, it would tend to hit us in the fourth quarter of the year. And we've been battling that for years, but the similarities to 1998 were actually discussed by Joe Kearns in a recent discussion he had, where he indicated that coming into the end of 2020, that would rival 1998 in that our ability to harvest the pigs was significantly overrun and depressed domestic uptake. And he points out in particular two similarities. Just as in 1998, both Christmas and New Year's fall on a Friday. And so those days are out for harvest. Thursday will probably be slow, and Saturday may not be the best. And that will worsen the backlog. And the problem is, it, just as it did in 1998, will extend the severe financial loss. So that's the one time where I think we've seen this type of stress.
Interesting. Brent, Mark, there any comments from your experience over the crisis in the last few decades?
So, like Dr. Boyd, was personally involved in the industry and trading through the 1998 crisis, and there are many similarities, and it felt very, very similar. I would tell you personally, this feels more extreme and more poignant. As bad as that time period in our history was, this feels worse. And unfortunately, I don't think we are still past the worst of it. I think we are, as an industry, very focused on the revenue side of the equation today, and making sure we can get as many pounds of pork harvested and paid for our producers as possible. The flip side is you wouldn't think today that you'd be worried about feed costs and the cost side of the equation, but from a very cyclical and seasonal perspective, we may be entering a time period where we're going to see higher feed costs in terms of corn, meal, and for those that can use wheat and wheat byproducts and those kinds of things, you may see those products trend higher over the course of the next 6 months. And so we may be facing a double whammy, so to speak, in terms of lost revenue, but also an appreciating cost complex over the course of the next 6 to 12 months.
Very good. Any comments there, Brent, before we move forward?
Yeah, I'd say, I was in graduate school in the 90s when that was occurring, what Dean and Mark are talking to, so was somewhat insulated from that. But definitely since then, this is definitely the most challenging that we've seen for a long period or long horizon. So making sure that we care for the people and the talent that are within our industry and continue to move the industry forward. So good learning experience for us all. Tough one to learn, but.
Mm-hmm. What is the range of strategies that you guys have seen here in the recent past to slow pigs down, and was it successful? And also, packing capacity came up quicker than I would anticipate it. But what is also the status of that?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I'll start us off there, 𝗪𝗫𝘀, in that, for a long period of time, we were doing so much work as an industry on trying to make it through summer and try to reduce whether it be seasonal infertility or growth rate through that time. But definitely this one is where we definitely had to pivot fast and quickly to get some answers out to ourselves and the rest of the industry. And I think, now instead of replacing ractopamine and heat stress mitigation, we're looking towards how we can slow those down. And unfortunately, it was happening at a time that the temperature wasn't helping us out as much as well. But what I will say is the industry definitely met the challenge with a lot of good work. I think part of that work was led by Iowa State, and what I saw there too is a lot of industry folk, both producers and feed companies, provided data to help producers out to kind of feather those out. And so I want to acknowledge the collaboration that occurred as an industry from that perspective. Definitely when you think about those strategies, definitely high fiber, if you could find high fiber at that time, was something that you attempted to do. But at that time, distillers definitely wasn't being produced as much. Corn was relatively cheap. Another method that was attempted and with some success, calcium chloride to actually reduce feed intake in an ad lib situation. Those that found it at a price ahead of time and could procure enough definitely was able to put the brakes on and kind of help through that piece. And then I'm sure there's others, but then the probably the one that heard most about, at least from my perspective, was kind of mostly a corn diet, reduce amino acids, specifically tryptophan and some other amino acids as well, but to really slow them down. I think there's some really good work by multiple groups that showed that those were definitely a way that could be done. And I think the thing there, especially when you mention for a shorter period of time than we were expecting, that the compensatory gain specifically in that one if you were needing to get some weight back on those animals, we're able to do that as well. And I think, what I've seen or heard about is a lot of different locations within the U.S., all with a little bit different impact from COVID on the packing plants and shackles. And so it created quite a bit of variation and specialty that no one way was better than another one, perhaps. So
that makes total sense. Dean, any comments there?
I'll just echo what Brent said, and I think what I'll do is just package it just a little bit. I think as we came out of this, we realized that there were a couple very helpful approaches. And the first that Brent mentioned was kind of a rigorous reduction of intake using NDF, which some in the pig industry have known about, but it's pretty common in cattle, and as well as calcium chloride. So in that case, we were attempting to reduce intake, in turn growth, but not to change the composition of growth. Mm-hmm. However, as in some cases we needed to get more extreme, then the corn approach, as Brent described, is one of also changing body condition, or composition. Mm-hmm. But it'll probably be hard to evaluate except in careful side-by-side studies, because the period that we did it was for such a short period of time. Now, there has been a dogma out there for a time that perhaps significant shortage of lysine deficit may cause vices to increase. And if they did increase, it doesn't appear to be by very much, if at all. So you have a couple different approaches. Some attempted also to initiate the summer temperature or heat stress by affecting the temperature in the barn, had to carefully transition gradually. And I think in a number of cases that led to more vices than hoped. So the first two approaches, in all honesty, were quite effective.
Very good. Any thoughts there, Mark, from what you have seen?
No, I think that the fellows have covered this quite well. And in particular, from my seat, the speed at which we were able to cover this as an industry was quite impressive. Certainly we all wish we would have not had to learn this on the fly and maybe, if you will, pave the road while we're driving down it. But I think it's a great example of different entities within the industry being able to collaborate in very short notice, and really speaks to some of the sentiments and comments that I'd like to make sure people are thinking about today, and that is this whole concept of changing before we're forced to, and making sure we're working to be revolutionary and not just evolutionary.
Very good. I have one question, then I want to get back to the revolution right there. So you guys discussed about the market outlook from a diet standpoint. Anything now that we should be thinking? Of course, we discussed about keeping costs down. Anything else diet-wise that we should be considering?
Yeah, I would say that it seems like, and I alluded to this a little bit before, that it seems like there's many producers might be in a different spot, or there's a spectrum of how many were affected or to what degree. Some definitely more than others, based on whether they're raising wean pigs or following those pigs all the way to market for open market, or if they own the shackles as well. So there seems to be a broad spectrum. And so if anything, it's probably, I would say, just as much as getting as much as you can out of your nutritionist to help decide how much to either put on the brake or how much to push the accelerator, as it seems to be a range out there today. And so being able to predict that performance, regardless of how short or long some of these feeding strategies are, I would definitely say it's definitely counter to what's been done in most unique times. But if anything, this is a shout out to those that are marketing pigs, managing space, and working together with the nutrition to figure out how to get the right weight. And that's probably another piece of this as well. What is the optimal market weight for your particular situation? But again, the collaborative approach to be able to get what's right for each producer, each entity.
Anything there, Dean?
Clearly endorse what Brent has indicated. One needs to cut as much cost out of the diets as possible, which in addition to using DDGs, mids, corn, germ, bakery, to the extent that you can get it, no fat should be the rule in most cases. It's unclear to me why some will use fat even now, 40 to 50 pounds, except for maybe a political concern on the feed conversion erosion. And as Brent indicated, one of the very powerful ways to reduce diet costs is to reduce the weight of the pig. Now, this is something where, as a part of the diet cost reduction, and so the integrated people, such as those of the Triumph Food Group, we would, if we didn't consider the plant and the output, we would put out a smaller pig. However, when the plant and the field is considered, we remain with a fairly heavy pig, 218 to 19 carcass pounds. But if one is not integrated and has the opportunity, just as Brett indicated, you need to look at how much what is your optimum weight, and recalculate that very, very carefully, because there is an opportunity to take dollars off, not dimes.
Yes. Yeah, that makes total sense. Figuring out the optimal market weight there. Good timing for that. Very good. Mark, revolution, you mentioned a few times. What are the most successful producers right now doing to cope with the crisis?
Great question, Marcio, and I'm looking forward to getting Dean and Dr. Frederick to jump in on this as well. But I think the most successful producers in the industry right now are being bold. As an example, not worrying about the next 100th point of lysine in the diet, and that 5 cents or 3 cents a pig or whatever that's worth. And I'm obviously making those numbers up, right? But the principle that I'm trying to espouse here is, and it's unfortunate that we always tend to revert to do this in times of crisis. We should be doing this in the really great times as well. But what is out there in your operation that if you thought about it a different way, you walked around that pop can and looked at it from a different angle, you might look at it and say, wow, there's $1 ahead on the table if I would just change X, Y, Z. Yep, we've done it that way for 25 years, but maybe we should rethink this process. And so I'll give you a really easy example. It has nothing to do with the live animal itself. Have experience with a system recently that had some feed manufacturing facilities inspected and audited. And at the end of that audit, they happened to be using a bulk amino acid in one of their bulk bins. And that producer walked away from that audit with a very simple resizing of a motor on the auger to jog in a more appropriate amount of lysine into a bin saved $100,000, right? And so on some very, very obvious everyday activities, as an industry, I would challenge us to say we've got $50,000, $100,000, $250,000 bills laying around, and we may at times walk over those looking for a dollar. And I think if there was ever a time to be turning over every rock and thinking about every process in your business differently, this would be the time to be doing it. And to your question, 𝗪𝗫𝘀, I think the folks that are long-term survivors in the industry are the ones that are doing that right now as we speak.
Very, very good. Very well said. Dean?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, the issue of what people are doing right now to cope with the crisis. And right now, things should have been determined years ago. And so I think successful people have already forward planned. And one of the things they have to do is to have good cash and lender retention. So one really needs to communicate carefully and closely with the lender. Having the lender in the dark is not a good strategy. The second thing is, as been indicated, you've got to execute a good plan for cost control. And just to summarize, we've talked about cheaper diets, market weight effect on diet costs, but also to limit our pigs to those that are viable and healthy pigs that will become full value pigs. When we consider our costs, though, we need to know, and sometimes it takes a committee of external counselors to know what costs add value and what costs don't. Also, we've been under such stress over and again, but as we watch the industry evolve, if one has not made a significant effort to align themselves with the plant, some have been fortunate to own, but at least get plant alignment and respect from the plant that can pay a reasonable fee for the pig, then some of the particularly smaller ones that may not be in a position to do that may find survival long-term better as at least a portion of their pigs go into a niche market. And we have some wonderful examples of those that have done that and done it successfully.
Very good, Dean. Any thoughts there, Brent, as well?
Yeah, I'll maybe add to some of the great points from my colleagues there. From what Dean said is predictable performance for the lenders. If we are going to make decisions that's going to increase our feed efficiency, but overall diet costs are better, having clear line of sight and being able to develop that trust, both in each other and to the lenders. I think that's definitely something there that could help. And then to capitalize kind of what Mark was indicating, there's many times where one formulates and then finds out that from formulation somewhere along the path, those nutrients that you think you're delivering aren't necessarily there. So definitely some opportunity there. I'd say probably one of the other things there is as we have slowed these animals down is we probably have some variation to contend with and how we address that and get the most out of the pigs that we do have. How do we do that? But at the end of it, it's about the forward thinking that has been done in the past and continues, the adaptability, and then continuous contingency planning to make sure that the options are there and thinking out further than just what's here in front of us today. So definitely the successful ones do that and do that extremely well.
Very good. Something that I was thinking about a week or two ago that I think everyone should revisit is the particle size. You know, if you're running 100, 200 microns above what it should, it's a good time to revisit that.
That's probably the best use of statistical process control that I've ever seen is that. So definitely so.
Marcio, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go up about 10,000 feet to come back on the question of what should we be thinking of right now. We know that the elephant in our marketing room is how dependent we are as an industry on the export market. And most of our partners are good partners and are within reason predictable. But the Chinese, I'll say Communist Party, is undependable trading partner. They're very business minded. And at the present time, with this world glut of pigs, China is a real helpmate to us. And it comes at a time when our normally very reliable partner in Mexico, because of the COVID, is imports so far are down. But the exports to China are record. And so as far as what should we be thinking about, I think it's all hands on deck for on the export deck. We have quite a backlog. We have a lot of pigs coming. Based on the pig and sow report, we have far too many pigs. And with pigs being cheap and with the dollar strength where it's at, it's a great time to clear out pork to help ourselves. And this 25 to 27% of our pork product being exported is not going to cut it going forward. It's going to have to be over 30%. And we also, as an industry, can pride ourselves in the fact that we really have been improving so that each year there is approximately 0.1 pigs more weaned than there was the prior year. And so export better be very good. And if at all possible, we can't sustain a 6 million sow population. It really needs to come back to 5.6 or 5.7.
Do you guys think the industry, and I'm not super in tune with the political side of things within the industry, but is the industry doing everything we can to improve exports, or do you guys see any opportunities there or gaps?
Sounds like a Mark question.
Yeah, I would say that thanks, Dean. Appreciate that. I would, Marcio, I would say that we've, as an industry, earned some very hard-won fights with respect to the export market over the last 5 to 10 years, inclusive of redrawing of the lines of engagement around NAFTA and what that means for us going forward. That fight, however, is never done, and it's intricately woven into the discussion that Dean just shared with us around reliable trading partners versus unreliable trading partners. And so I view the question as a bit of a give and take issue, right? We would always like to sell more. And I think as an industry, whether that's our trade organizations or U.S. Meat Export Federation or the federal government more broadly, as well as state delegations where appropriate or where they are active, we're always trying to sell more. And so the question becomes, what's the most effective way to do that, and which partners are you going to pick to be able to make that happen? Those are complex questions and equations to try to put a number to. I would say we can always do more. We need to do more.
Interesting. Very good. And I know, Dean, you mentioned the political feed efficiency, meaning some folks I've seen around the globe as well. No, I need to have this good feed efficiency. So this is probably the best timing in history to stop doing that. Stop looking at just that number instead of profitability. But
that's exactly right, and it hit us very hard about 2008-ish. But prior to that point, the person with the best feed conversion had a good probability of having the lowest cost per pound of gain. But most of the time since then, that's not been the case. And some of us went to great effort to create the studies to show our people, for one, tell them forget about the pounds of feed per pound of gain, but to go to a caloric feed conversion, because that's not going to vary over time. And secondly, to show them that the pounds of feed per pound of gain, most cases will give you a higher cost to get the pig out the door. And so I think this is where the conversion to caloric feed conversion was helpful, because it doesn't bounce up and down. And then secondly, to either provide or borrow the studies to help show the core management team to gain their confidence that we need to be flexible in that regard. And I think because of the political feed conversion that had to be delivered on, there's really been 50 cents to $1 a pig loss in many cases. So,
very good. I have a last question here for you guys, unless you have something else to add. Question is, and I know it's a tough time for the industry, but also looking to the future, 5 or 10 years out, on a more optimistic view here, what are advice that you have for young swine professionals and or nutrition?
My advice, Marcio, would be understand all the workings of the industry from start to finish. And so it's easy for us as human beings to fall in love with a certain piece of the puzzle because it happens to be what we're experts at. Whether that's a sow farm manager or a nutritionist or a accountant in the back office, right? We tend to gravitate towards what we know the best. My advice to youngsters in the industry is to completely and fully understand the equation that represents profit and focus on generating profit first, which will come from levers that you pull around both revenue and cost management. Certainly, we have to always be cost competitive, but profit is largely, as I think on this call we all know, driven by dollars in and the revenue that we gain from the sale of our product. And so as you're thinking about the industry and you're a youngster, fully understand all the levers that create profit and the why around people engaging in this business.
I love it.
That's probably one of the most important things that could be said for as advice to the up and coming generation. In terms of experience, get everything you can. So your ability to be mobile and to think clearly above the neck is very, very highly trained. And I think Mark Hulsebus is an example of that. The mobility and the depth that he has, and he's not my boss, but I'm just saying this, that he has he's of great value. And that's the kind of kids we want to come forward with vast experience and ability to think. We can find people to shovel. We need some serious thinkers in the field of business.
Yes. On that arena, something that I'm passionate about is something that Elon Musk said one day, which is thinking by first principles, which is like I think Mark just described, right? Break things down, cost and revenue and the levers. And that's how Elon Musk was able to bring the cost of, space 10x down. But very good, Brent.
I think it's well said. I echo that. So good ending point.
Appreciate that. And thanks so much, guys, for your time. And we're looking forward to catch up face to face here sometime.
Well, thank you.
It'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcio. Good talking to you, fellas.